book came out in the studio, he said, well, Hugh, he got that wonderful Boston, Hugh, the founders didn't know about the internet. And I said, they knew about liberty. And so my answer is, yeah, you might not know what general welfare means, but you know what freedom is. And of course, the response to that is Silicon Valley freedom? Is Twitter and Facebook freedom?
I think we know what general welfare means, and I think we need to pay more attention to it. It's the common good. And you have that reference twice in the Constitution, promote the common defense and general welfare. We talk a lot about the common defense. I do, because I was a national security correspondent for decades. But general welfare, I think we need to go back and listen to these guys. What are they saying? They're telling us there are common goods: education, infrastructure, environment, and most notably in this infested year, public health. And if I could impeach President Trump on one thing, it would be for violating the general welfare clause.
Well,
not helping.
Rats, you ruined my objective,
Let me
Tom.
finish here.
I wanted to get through without mentioning Trump, because this book ought to endure long beyond Trump and Biden.
I will, but we need to pay attention to general welfare in the context of public health.
I agree, but I believe the Constitution would put the requirement of that at the state level, because the police power is at the state level, and it's not one of the enumerated powers that the federal government received. And their balancing of that is, to me, exigent at all times, that we have to preserve freedom, even at cost of, we are a freedom people. I just said that to this young man who called in about your book. We are a freedom people. Let me ask.
I disagree. I think it puts it at the level of Congress, because common defense is clearly a congressional responsibility.
Oh, that's true. That's a good argument.
And general welfare comes right after that twice. I think it rests with Congress.
But the articulation of the commerce power is there, and they could work through it, and the court will do that. But you got to have activity to regulate. It's an interesting long debate. I want to close our conversation. I want people to read First Principles. I want to know if you were going to go off with one book from that era. If you were going to take one book, I know what I would take from that era that they studied. Which one would you take in companion with First Principles?
I think, because I think James Madison needs to be paid more attention, I would say Richard Brookhiser's wonderful biography of James Madison.
Oh, interesting. I would take Plutarch's Lives. I just think the lives drove so much of what they understood about the Roman Revolution and about the Greek city-states. Do you want to amend and extend your remarks?
Well, start with Brookhiser on Madison. I think it's because Brookhiser understands politics, and most academic historians do not understand politics. And once you start understanding James Madison, it will lead you into these other things and understanding the country.
That's well said. I also like Lynn Cheney's book on Madison, because she, unlike Brookhiser, knew about the epilepsy. They're both good books. Tom Ricks, yours is great. First Principles, available everywhere at Amazon and bookstores everywhere. What America's founders learned from the Greeks and Romans and how they shaped our country. Thank you, Tom. Be well. At Tom Ricks1 on Twitter. At Tom Ricks1 on Twitter. Let me also remind all of you for my first principle every day is to take relieffactor.com, which I normally take in the first hour and then remind you about in this hour and the third hour. Didn't take it today because I'm out waiting for my resupply to arrive as the long weekend comes. Maybe I'll go to Mount Vernon again. That would be quite the long walk, but maybe I'll do it. Mount Vernon, wherever you're going this weekend, if you're just going out and about, if you're running on the mall, if you're running on the beach in Southern California, if you're on the beach in the Panhandle, if you're up on already getting your ice hut ready in Minnesota cold, wherever you are, relieffactor.com will help you get through the months ahead. If you're aging, and you definitely are, if you're exercising, you should be, relieffactor.com is for you. Don't go anywhere. Coming back with Alfredo Ortiz of the Job Creator Network to talk about what's going on in Georgia and what the Job Creators Network is doing there. Stay tuned, America.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
And I went to Nate Silver's website. Nate Silver is a fool who gets paid millions of dollars to deceive you about polling and the way elections are going to turn out. Nate Silver said that the Democrats had a 75% chance of taking back the Senate, and Donald Trump had only an 11% chance of winning the presidency. Now, from all independent observers, if you only live within a 5-block radius in Manhattan or a 6-block radius in Washington, D.C., or a 10-block radius in San Francisco, I could see why you would think that Joe Biden would win in a landslide. You would think that the rallies are just Trump re-energizing the same group of people and that nothing was really happening that was out of the ordinary. It wasn't that exciting. After everything we've thrown at President Trump, there's no way he could win this thing again. The conventional wisdom amongst the intelligentsia was that President Donald Trump was going to get clobbered last Tuesday. And because of that, Steve Daines was going to lose the Montana Senate race, that Tom Tillis was going to lose the race in North Carolina. In fact, Nate Silver had his final projection of having Tom Tillis losing by 3 points. 3 points. No, even more than 3 points. 3.2 points. When in reality, Tom Tillis won by over 1.5 points. He called the North Carolina Senate race a lean Democrat Senate race.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
But what are the things that we must now recognize? Here they are. No president in our republic's history received as many votes as Donald Trump did. Oh, and we didn't need to cheat, by the way. We didn't need to get people to say, oh, you've got to vote early. Mail those ballots in. Harvest those ballots. No. More than 71 million votes already. More, and I bet this stings, than even Barack Obama. Yes. And what's stunning is he received almost 5 million more votes than he did 4 years ago. Now, why is that interesting? Because if you look at the exit polls, Donald Trump received almost 20% of the male black vote in America. He received the highest minority support since the 1950s as a Republican candidate, nominee, or president. He even received, latest counts, 28% of the gay and lesbian.
Welcome back, America. Coming up after the break, the Hillsdale Dialogue. But I want to end this hour with Alfredo Ortiz, CEO of Job Creators Network. Of course, Job Creators Network has been our partner and our sponsor through much of election 2020. They are now resting, but not in Georgia. Alfredo, welcome. How are you, my friend?
Hey, I'm doing great, Hugh. Thank you for having me. Yeah, definitely not resting. We're here in Georgia. We're going to be here all the way through the election, January 5th. Way important races, you know.
No, I like to tell people they can't move to Georgia for the purposes of voting. That is illegal. In fact, it's a felony. But they can actually go there and help. What is the Job Creator Network doing to get David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler elected?
Yeah, so we actually started a super PAC, actually. So, you know, a Keep America Action Fund. And we are doing old-fashioned stomping, barnstorming of the state. We got a couple buses coming in, billboards, radio. We are pushing not necessarily a vote for the two, but a vote for our freedoms and our liberties. And quite frankly, a checks and balances that could be so desperately needed, to counteract what could potentially be a Biden-Harris administration. We need this firewall in the Senate. It needs to stay in control of the Republicans.
Now, I like to play it. I'm going to play it right now. Cut number one. I want every Georgian to hear this. Cut number one.
Now we take Georgia, and then we change the world. Yeah! I'm sorry, can you repeat that, Mr. Schumer? Now we take Georgia, and then we change America.
Did you hear that, Alfredo? Now we take Georgia and change the world. Now we take Georgia and change America. I hope every Georgian hears that about 25,000 times between now and January 5.
And we're going to keep on reminding them, Hugh, because, again, we have so much at stake here. Again, this is not only a Georgia election, this is a national election with massive implications. If that Senate agenda falls in the hands of Chuck Schumer, forget it. Game over.
Now, let me talk a little bit about early voting. I know that Atlanta has been the site, I believe Atlanta has been the site, I say I know it, I think I remember it, of massive ice storms. People cannot wait till January 5. They have early voting. They have vote by mail and absentee. Is Job Creators Network and Keep America, America Fund stressing to people to vote as soon as they can?
Absolutely, Hugh. That is one of the main things we're stressing because of also the holidays, as you can imagine. People may not be going out internationally, but folks, and especially in a lot of our, conservative bases, they do travel. They do go to different locations. And so we need people to make sure that they do that early voting. It starts December 12th. They need to get in there, do their part, because again, the entire fate of our country is now resting on the shoulders of conservatives in Georgia.
December 12th. So is that when they can get an absentee, or is that when they can go to an early voting center?
Early voting center, and we are encouraging that so we don't have all this craziness again. We need to get these guys, everybody, conservatives, go out, start early voting as soon as it opens up. Get there before all the holidays and all that, and before people start traveling.
Are you going to post a list of all the early voting centers, Alfredo Ortiz, at the Job Creator Network or keepamericaamerica.com?
Yes, exactly. Same thing that we did on a national basis. We're going to be really focused, here in the different, counties and stuff like that, hitting, key precincts and stuff like that, because again, we need to get the message out. Looking at some of the numbers, North Fulton County, for example, Cobb County, Hugh, here in Georgia, didn't perform as well as it should have amongst conservative voters. So we got to make that change. We got to make sure that does not happen by January 5th.
Well, I would like to persuade some of the people who voted for Raphael Warnock that he's actually, I know you're not partisan, but I would like them to know the issue set before them and how Raphael Warnock is a radical and Kelly Loeffler is a center-right conservative. I would like them to know how John Ossoff is a AOC light and Senator David Perdue is a respected member of the Senate. I would like them to have the issues compared. I mean, packing the courts, abolishing Medicare, cutting defense spending. The radicals on the Democratic ticket are just out of step with Georgia, I think.
Yeah, they're completely out of step with Georgia. And again, if this agenda in the Senate gets in the whole, in the hands of Chuck Schumer, Hugh, I mean, you can only imagine everything you've outlined and more. They will have complete control, and we cannot do that. At least we have, West Virginia Senator Manchin is saying, as far as like defunding police efforts or court packing, he's going to side with us on this one. He, not a believer in that stuff. So I know that didn't make AOC very happy, but
But he's going to get rolled, Alfredo. I saw what the senator said, but you know what? He's not going to be able to stop their radical judicial nominees. He's not going to be able to stop crazy nominees to the agencies.
No, that's right.
He's not going to be able to stop defunding the military here and there if he's got the chairmanship of a committee. We've got to keep armed services under Jim Inhofe's gavel. I mean, there are military bases all over Georgia that will wither on the vine by decreased spending if Georgia doesn't send back serious defense-minded senators.
That's right. Well, and you got, potentially, if we do lose control on that Senate, you got Bernie Sanders potentially in charge of, Senate, budget committee. I mean, this just could be a complete disaster. I mean, again, you start thinking about, what that cabinet would even look like. I mean, makes even more sense why we need to defend the Senate. I mean, potentially Bernie Sanders for labor, Senator Warren for Treasury, AOC for energy. I mean, my God, Hugh, what a disaster.
So keep AmericaAmerica.com, the Job Creators Network on Twitter, at Job Creators USA. Alfredo Ortiz, CEO, thank you for joining me. Thanks for sponsoring the show for many years. Don't go anywhere, America. I'll be right back with the Hillsdale Dialogue. Another great sponsor of the show is Hillsdale College, and we'll carry on with them right after this.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
To answer your question specifically about, how can we get it done that fast in just a matter of weeks? Hand recounts, we know from the Florida 2000 experience, they can be done relatively quickly. And if that's what it takes, by the way, if we win Arizona, and it looks like we're going to by a hair, but it looks like we're going to win Arizona in the next 24 hours, could even be today. If we win there, we're then talking about two states really in play, Georgia and Pennsylvania, potentially Wisconsin as well. So, realize we're not talking about a hand recount potentially of 10 states. We're talking about two, possibly three at the very most. That's something America can do. It's something, again, we did in Florida under highly contentious circumstances at that time. Can we do that again? I mean, we think it's realistic to at least try. Again, is it going to succeed? I don't know. And if I'm being honest with the audience, I don't want to give people false hope. I think it's an uphill battle for us. But I also believe we have to wage this uphill battle because I firmly believe, Dennis, that we won the legal vote. I think what the Democrats did, particularly in states like Pennsylvania, is they used the virus as an excuse to absolutely overwhelm a system with mail-in voting, knowing full well that there would be no way that they could properly vet the validity of these votes. And by the way, instead of just my opinion, let me give you a number on that. So Pennsylvania rejected, in this election, they rejected mail-in votes, a total of 0.03% were rejected. Now, let's put that in context. Typically in Pennsylvania, they reject about 1%, so 3 times that many. In terms of first-time mail-in voters, because they just make more mistakes, Pennsylvania typically rejects 3% historically.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
Well, you'd be surprised how many people are for defunding the police. I've got to believe Black Lives Matter is. Black Lives Matter, a letter was sent to Biden and Harris after their presumptive win. Black Lives Matter co-founder, somebody named Patrice Cullors, said the support of the group's movement is going to cost them. This is according to Town Hall. The BLM Global Network Foundation leader first started by congratulating the two and then requested a meeting to, quote, discuss the expectations that we have for your administration and the commitments that must be made to Black people. She said the intolerable conditions faced by Black people in America will not end overnight. Without the resounding support of Black people, we would be saddled with a very different electoral outcome, she wrote on behalf of the BLM Global Network. In short, Black people won this election. Alongside Black-led organizations, Black Lives Matter invested heavily in the election. Vote and organize became our motto. And she also ended her letter with a kind of a thinly veiled attack on Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's criminal justice records.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
When the call was made on Saturday, I had to put up a little post that really got a lot of pushback in the Northeast area, New Jersey, New York area, from people that I know. And I said, if you're a Biden-Harris supporter and you're celebrating today, just understand that as a brother or sister in Christ, you have many around you who are mourning what that would mean, mourning the death of millions more babies. I got the most hateful responses of anything I've ever had response given me to. And Eric, I've had death threats against me before, but I've had people, I went to theology school at Moody Bible Institute 100 years ago that said, all you do is worship at the altar of the tyrant. And it's one of those things where you kind of scratch your head and you say, well, I understand that there's personality differences that you didn't care for, but you can't argue with the policy outcomes. And that's what the guy did. I was greatly encouraged the next day because my pastor, Ryan Batesel, who pastors a church called Emergence here in the tri-state area, said this in his morning message. He said, if we are not, as the church, willing to do battle for justice, compassion, and truth, who will? And Eric, that question looms large on me as we are facing these legal recourses. If we don't step into this gap at this point in time and say, no, we're going to hold a place to find out what is the truth, no one else will. The media certainly will not. So it is up to the church to say, if we're going to be governed by truth, if we want truth to be relevant in the lives of our nation, it's going to be the church that has to bring that out.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
So the expectation that was built by the pollsters and the pundits and by the prognosticators was that we were going to get wiped out. Nancy Pelosi said that she was going to gain anywhere between 15 and 25 House seats. That was her public projection. And then starting on Saturday evening, last Saturday evening, about 11 days ago, I started to see data in the Des Moines Register poll and other polls that showed the Democrat blue wall, the Democrat base, was collapsing. I'm sure that Joe Biden saw the very same internal polling. The entire Biden campaign saw the same sort of movement that they feared. You see, throughout September and October, the race was legitimately very much in Joe Biden's favor. But elections are funny things. When you have 9 to 15% of people that are undecided, and all of a sudden President Donald Trump starts to win 70% of those undecided voters, the race can get wildly and totally and completely out of control, especially for Joe Biden. The ideal scenario for Joe Biden was to win by so much that any of the shenanigans or the mechanical side or the Chicago machine politics was not going to be necessary in any of the key states. But it started to be clear that late Sunday evening, as I was flipping through some of the polls that were being made public and some of the tracking numbers, it started to become very, very clear that Joe Biden was in trouble. Now, you didn't see this on CNN. You didn't see this on MSNBC.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
Joe Biden is not the president-elect. Not because states have not certified the election, which they have not, but because the president-elect is deemed by the Electoral College that will come together in the state houses next month. I find it so peculiar that an immigrant, yes, I am a legal immigrant, has to correct most of the mainstream media. In fact, I had to correct, just this morning, somebody called Condoleezza Rice. Do you remember her? She was National Security Advisor to George Bush, who has congratulated Joe Biden also for being president-elect. George W. Bush,
Glory America, bonjour, hi Canada, it's Hugh Hewitt. That music means it's the last radio hour of my week. That means it's the Hillsdale Dialogue, where once a week I go high and I go back in time and I go to important issues that endure with one or more of the great voices that reside within the Hillsdale College ecosystem. All things Hillsdale are at Hill.edu. All of their online courses, all of our previous Hillsdale Dialogues are at hugh4hillsdale.com. This week, we don't have Dr. Larry Arm. We do have Dean Matthew Spalding, who helms Hillsdale in D.C., the graduate program at Hillsdale College in the District of Columbia. Dean Spalding is always a frequent welcome guest on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Good morning, Dean. How are you?
Good morning, Hugh. How are you? I've got Georgia on my mind.
You and me both. I like to begin after this 10 days of extraordinary stress with an open-ended question, what do you think? What are you thinking about the most?
Well, I think particularly one thinks of next steps and where things go, but I think it's important to back up for a moment and put this in perspective. If you look at the what happened, let's set the presidency aside for a moment. Let them do the recounts. Let them figure that out. Let's hold it in place for a moment. Look at everything else. Many differences at the presidential level. From my rough calculations, I'm not in the math department, the politics department. It's about 0.002% of the American electorate determined the outcome in those 6 or 7 key states. 0.002. This was an amazingly close election. And then if you add to that what happened to the House where they picked up seats, or what happened in the state houses, which I think is now, 2 or 3 pickups. Republicans picked up a governor. All other things being equal, this was actually a quite successful election for the Republicans. And there is no mandate for a progressive wave. So you've got a real divide in this country, divided very seriously on legitimate, serious grounds. You had a presidential election which is undetermined, but looks like Joe Biden is the presumptive winner of that. But that means you're going into this elections in Georgia, but in general, you're looking forward to midterms and the next presidential election in a situation where the two parties are very divided, and the more extreme elements of progressives, in which the pollsters all told us was on a huge wave, did not happen. So I think that kind of resets the political debate in a way that makes this a much more fluid and open field conversation, as opposed to those who might have thought that this was a huge wave against not only President Trump, but Trumpism and the new set of agenda that's coming together for the Republican Party. I think all of that is an open question right now, and I think that in particular then will change and shape how you look at those Georgia runoff Senate seats.
Now, Dr. Spalding, I want to talk about something Dr. Arnn has said since 2015 about Donald Trump. He has always defended and obliged himself to follow the Constitution. The Constitution does not dictate Twitter norms. The Constitution dictates that the executive follow the judiciary, et cetera. It dictates that you need a constitutional majority to be the president. It dictates that the Senate has to pass and the House has to agree, and they both have to confer and send to the president. He's never departed from them. I have not seen any evidence he's going to do so here. I believe there's a lot of hysteria on the left. I mean, ridiculous, absurd hysteria that is intentionally provoked by people in bad faith. Do you agree with my assessment of that?
No, I think that's right. And I would also have to point out that I think that there are friends of ours who are kind of looking for possibilities about what might happen here and what kind of grasping at possibilities. I think the important thing right now is that we proceed with the proper legal and constitutional processes. States have to certify their elections. They get to a point where they certify, they send electors. I mean, this is why there is this complicated process called the Electoral College to kind of keep these things in check within the legal process. And if something comes up that we find, if there are the actual cases of fraud, which I'm sure there are out there, they should be gone after and shut off. And Florida now, right now, what I can tell, has a very good electoral system because they reacted against what happened in 2000 and beyond in terms of their electoral system. But the larger questions, the bigger questions about the outcome and changing the outcome of the election, let's let the process go through. There are going to be a couple of recounts. There are going to be some lawsuits which have already been filed. Those right now do not strike me as such they will turn over the election. They might make some corrections about absentee balloting or balloting after the election date, which I think would be good to do. But they're not going to change the outcome. But play all that out. Let it be played out in a legitimate, serious, thoughtful way.
You know, Matt, over at HughHewitt.com, and indeed at the website of every Salem host, there is a banner at the very top. If people want change in the electoral system, if they want audits, if they want a review of everything that's happened, they can sign that petition. It's at hughhewitt.com. And it's got words in it that I wouldn't have used. I didn't write it, but I know what the genesis of it is, which is frustration at the obvious malignancy of some areas in the country when it comes to transparency, and of dysfunction in other areas of the country simply because they're outdated and they're run by just incompetent buffoons. That can't be dictated from the federal government. That has to be organic. Do you think there is within the states, because we have a federal system, do you sense that Florida effect of 2000 will now be felt in places like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Arizona and Nevada and all throughout the union?
Oh, no, I think it will. The question will be how much it does. I mean, look, the federal government, by the Constitution, the electoral systems is controlled by the states, and in particular, the state legislatures actually have the driver's seat here. And in Pennsylvania and Michigan, for instance, the legislature is controlled by the Republicans with the Democratic governor. They're going to have to get this figured out. Now, I would add, it's to everyone's interest looking to, 2, 4, 8, years ahead to get all of this cleared up. If you're a Democrat or a Republican, it doesn't matter. You want to have a clean electoral system. You want to get your rolls clean. You want to shut down fraud. And I hope after this election there will be some serious rethinking about part of the problems of this election in particular are not. Some of it is what's going on right now, and there are claims to look into, but really it's things that happened prior to the election in terms of allowing mail-in balloting, extending deadlines, reducing the checks on that balloting in terms of signatures. Those things are legislative questions that need to be thought through prior to the elections, and looking ahead, they need to go back and look at those, and I think pull back on some of these.
Now, Matt Spalding,
the problem is they create these conditions that give the perception of fraud, and you can see these correlations, and that undermines people's confidence in the system. You need to have confidence in the system rebuilt.
Now, Dean Spalding, I have told everyone I'm very, very disappointed in the result of the presidential election, but I have also told everyone this isn't my first rodeo. I've been in presidential elections since 1976, and I've won 6 and I've lost 6, meaning that my candidate won 6 times and my candidate lost 6 times. That's generally the sign of a healthy society, and I have encouraged younger people who are despondent to hang on to that. They're going to be doing this for 60 years. You just got to put on the full armor and be ready to go up and down, because that's the way it works.
No, I think that's right. But also, in particular, in this particular election, this is why I start off with backing up and seeing what else is going on. There are tectonic, the plates are kind of moving in ways that if you look at those, I mean, look, the Hispanic and Black and Asian vote changes in numerous districts in numerous states suggest to me that kind of the identity politics theory of modern progressivism isn't working well. What's happened in the House and these Senate seats didn't flip over. Remember what the polling was telling us beforehand. You got to add this to this picture as well. It's not just one vote for one person, even though the presidency is so important and it's so disappointing. But the evidence there is these battles aren't settled. The Republicans are going to live to fight another day. They're actually set up for midterms in 2 years. And all those electoral votes, all those states were within a whisker. I think that the biggest one is Michigan and now Pennsylvania is growing a little bit, but these are not wipeout states.
When we come back, we're going to talk about that polling issue because it's a huge deal. America has got to get off of polls. The addiction must be broken. Stay tuned, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Birch Gold Group.
Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
Professor, as you know, Fox News called Arizona real early, I think the first major network to do so for Joe Biden. If it flips back to Trump and Trump ends up winning that state, looking back at it, did their early call affect anything?
If President Trump holds Pennsylvania and Georgia, then Arizona was the decisive vote for Biden. And if they called it trying to end the inquiry early, and Trump ends up holding that and winning the election, that's just an unbelievable egg on the face. And why they called it so early when most of the other networks, anti-Trump networks, I should add, have retracted any early calls on Arizona once they actually looked at the numbers and where the uncounted votes yet were still to come in heavily Trump territory. I think it's significant. I don't quite understand the early call by Fox News on that.
Mm-hmm. Professor, if it turns out that Joe Biden ends up with 270 or more electoral votes, based on what you know right now, will you feel comfortable that America legitimately elected Joe Biden?
I don't, but I will say this. I think the Trump team is willing to press long-standing evidences of fraud. So we've known for years that dead people vote in Chicago. I mean, the old joke about the political scientist at Harvard who left in his will that he wanted to be buried in Chicago and said, "Why did you do that?" "So that I can continue to be active in politics." Those kind of long-standing frauds that have been going on for so long that people somehow feel entitled to them. I think the Trump team is going to be willing to push back on that.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Dennis Prager Show.
If you actually want to be a healer, if you actually mean that, you know what you would do, Joe Biden? You would say, I want to convince the Trump people, I want to convince the deplorables that the votes are accurate. So let's do a full audit. I mean, why wouldn't he? Why wouldn't he say that? Hey, there are questions here. We have 4 states that are in play. The maximum lead he has is 0.67%, okay? Fewer than 100,000 votes among those 4 states of Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Arizona. I'm saying 100,000 all in, added together. If he wants to be a healer, one quick way to heal would say, you know what, we need to make sure these votes are legitimate for everyone's sake. And yet, of course, he's doing exactly the opposite. He's been crowned as the president-elect by people like Fox News and CNN. And I think they're of the belief, it's almost like, Dennis, you know, it's football season now. There's a trick in football that I'm sure any fan has seen where when you get away with a controversial, the ref calls it your way, but review would probably overturn it. What does the team do in the NFL? They get right up to the line and snap it immediately because then you can't review the play. That's sort of what the media is trying to do here for Joe Biden. Well, let's just call him president-elect, and if we say it 5,000 times over the weekend, it's going to reinforce in people's minds that this is all decided when it is not decided.
Well said. So the problem, as I see it, is December 7th, I think it is the deadline, correct?
Yeah, I think the 8th, but right in there. And the 14th, they have to actually vote, correct?
Yes. So
the electors.
What can the Trump people do within this short time span?
Well, no, listen, it's formidable, and I don't want to look. I'm optimistic, and I think we have to fight, okay? But I'm also realistic, and I will be the first to admit that given the condensed time frame that you're talking about, it is an uphill battle for us.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
Remember, Biden supported the 1995 crime bill, and Harris was a prosecutor. And she wrote, "The best way to ensure that you remedy past missteps and work towards a more just future for Black people is to take your direction from Black grassroots organizers that have been engaged in this work for decades with a legacy that spans back to the first."
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. The Hillsdale Dialogue is underway. All things Hillsdale, including the applications, which are soaring because, of course, they do college at Hillsdale and they do it the right way. are available at hillsdale.edu. Dean Matthew Spalding runs the graduate school for Hillsdale in Washington, D.C. Dean Spalding, when we went to break, I said I was going to talk to you about polling. On Thursday's program, Chuck Todd and I, and Chuck's a friend, and he knows how great the epic failure of polling was. It's a year that will live in infamy for pollsters. It can't get any worse. They were all wrong except Trafalgar. Terribly, terribly, terribly wrong. We have to not pay attention to one poll out of Georgia. And Chuck began with, you got to have sample size of at least 10,000. There are lots of reforms. I don't trust them to be made in time for Georgia. But even if they were made for 4 years from now, I just think they're terrible for democracy. What is your thinking about polling?
No, look, they were off in 2016. They were off this time. There's already one early poll out in Georgia for those Senate races, and it's done by the same group that had that showed Trump would was only ahead by 5 or 6 points, and he actually won by 16. So I have zero confidence, and the American people have zero confidence in polls. This is part of a larger problem, I think, in our politics. For so long, we have come to look to technical experts to give us information about how we should have what our opinions should be. I think polling is a piece of that. We used to think that it was straightforward, ask people their opinion, record it, and report it. But there are so many things we now know about what assumptions go into your model, what do you account for, what are your turnout numbers, and push polling, and we know that people don't like to answer their phones. Some of it's done online. I think as any claim that polling had to a science, I think it's been completely undermined. Not only is it not a science, but there's sufficient evidence, I think, to suggest that it's being used to manipulate opinion.
To depress, to repress, yes.
Doing well. So I think it needs to be removed as a factor, as a so-called objective factor in our politics, and seen for what it is. We have polls in this country, same way we have. Our poll is called an election. People go out and vote. That's what the poll is, and that's the only poll that I know that's actually accurate anymore.
And Dr. Spalding, I have seen the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and people in Georgia are listening to me right now, already run a poll by the same people that were discredited. And I can't believe it. It's like going to a doctor who has serially killed patients. It's like, I want that surgeon who has managed to leave 20 dead people on the operating table. Why in the world would a reputable media organization, maybe the Atlanta Journal-Constitution isn't, resort to a poll right now? Because it gets clicks? That's just ridiculous.
Well, that or at the very least, we discount it because last time they were off by 10 points. Does that actually mean it's off by 10 points this time?
You're right. I'm wondering if the Hillsdale network is strong in Georgia, Dr. Spalding. Are there lots of Hillsdalians down there?
Oh, sure. We have lots of people that get in Primus and members of the President's Club, as we do lots of places. But we have a lot of friends in Georgia. I hope they're listening, and I'm sure our followers are listening everywhere about what's going on there. I think we're in this unusual situation where you've got two runoffs in one state at the same time in a crucial election. This is monumentally significant, historically unusual, and I think this is going to be a heck of a fight, and we should ignore polling and get down there and focus on it. And the outcome of that is going to determine the balance of the U.S. Senate at a time when we've had a very large debate. And at issue here is whether there's going to be a very, very extensive and broad progressive agenda, and comes back to the issue we've discussed many times before, which is this point about packing the courts.
When we come back from break, we're going to talk about every bad thing that's going to happen if the Democrats win those Georgia races, and every good thing that's going to happen if the Republicans win those Georgia races. But we are not going to rely on polls on this show because that is actually malpractice. It is malpractice for a broadcast journalist of any sort, especially during the Hillsdale Dialogue. If you want to reform the election system, go sign the petition at HughHewitt.com. But if you want to know what is going on, stay tuned to this Hillsdale Dialogue. I'll be right back with Dean Matthew Spalding, all things Hillsdale, at hillsdale.edu.
Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
And I went to Nate Silver's website. Nate Silver is a fool who gets paid millions of dollars to deceive you about polling and the way elections are going to turn out. Nate Silver said that the Democrats had a 75% chance of taking back the Senate, and Donald Trump had only an 11% chance of winning the presidency. Now, from all independent observers, if you only live within a 5-block radius in Manhattan, or a 6-block radius in Washington, D.C., or a 10-block radius in San Francisco, I could see why you would think that Joe Biden would win in a landslide. You would think that the rallies are just Trump re-energizing the same group of people, and that nothing was really happening that was out of the ordinary. It wasn't that exciting. After everything we've thrown at President Trump, there's no way he could win this thing again. The conventional wisdom amongst the intelligentsia was that President Donald Trump was going to get clobbered last Tuesday. And because of that, Steve Daines was going to lose the Montana Senate race, that Tom Tillis was going to lose the race in North Carolina. In fact, Nate Silver had his final projection of having Tom Tillis losing by 3 points. 3 points. No, even more than 3 points. 3.2 points. When in reality, Tom Tillis won by over 1.5 points. He called the North Carolina Senate race a lean Democrat Senate race.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
But what are the things that we must now recognize? Here they are. No president in our republic's history received as many votes as Donald Trump did. Oh, and we didn't need to cheat, by the way. We didn't need to get people to say, oh, you've got to vote early. Mail those ballots in. Harvest those ballots. No. More than 71 million votes already. More, and I bet this stings, than even Barack Obama. Yes. And what's stunning is he received almost 5 million more votes than he did 4 years ago. Now, why is that interesting? Because if you look at the exit polls, Donald Trump received almost 20% of the male black vote in America. He received the highest minority support since the 1950s as a Republican candidate, nominee, or president. He even received, latest counts, 28% of the gay and lesbian vote. Now, why does this matter? It's not just impressive. It is stunning if we think about the last 4 years.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
So I think he's going to end up winning Arizona. But it won't matter if he ends up losing Pennsylvania and or Georgia. Now, the question is, the legitimacy of those votes. And, we're looking at the count rather than axing the question on whether all those absentees that were turned in compliance with state law. Whether the signature verification was done or what have you. Mm-hmm. But the significance of the signature verification is to prove that the votes actually being delivered are cast by voters who had the legal authority to cast a vote. And without the signature verification process being done publicly and openly, as we saw in Detroit, for example, up in Michigan, where they actually boarded up the windows that would allow people to look at what was going on in the Wayne County canvassing of these absentee votes, then you have no legitimacy to the results of the election because both parties weren't there present to determine whether, in fact, the vote that was being separated from the envelope was actually a legally cast vote. And the statistical anomalies that we're seeing in large port in Detroit and over in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and in Philadelphia and in Atlanta really suggest that what we're witnessing was, let's wait to see how much Trump wins on Election Day, and then make sure we have enough ballots thrown in with absentees to overcome that lead that he accumulated on Election Day.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt, joined by Dean Matt Spalding. Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt, joined by Dean Matt Spalding. He is, of course, in charge of the graduate program of the Hillsdale College in D.C., the Kirby Center at Kirby Center. You can also find an application to the graduate program at Hillsdale in D.C. at hillsdale.edu. And you can find all of our previous conversations at hughforhillsdale.com. Dean Spalding, let's talk Georgia now. The pathways ahead of the United States, there are two. One is with Mitch McConnell as leader, and one is with Chuck Schumer as leader. I want to play for our audience what Chuck Schumer said last Saturday, cut number 1.
Now we take Georgia, and then we change the world. Yeah! I'm sorry, can you repeat that, Mr. Schumer? Now we take Georgia, and then we change America.
So I don't want anyone to think I've edited it. This is the real tape. I'm airing it at the same time on video at hughhewitt.com. I want to play it once more so everyone can hear what the minority leader of the Democratic Senate said and what he intends for Georgia. Cut number 1.
Now we take Georgia, and then we change the world. Yeah! I'm sorry, can you repeat that, Mr. Schumer? Now we take Georgia, and then we change America.
Okay, so Matt Spalding, the verb is take and change. The original one is take Georgia and then change the world. Part 2 is take Georgia and change America. What do you make of that?
Well, let me back up and make a general comment here and remind people of the role of the U.S. Senate. When we go back and read the Federalist Papers, right, the Senate plays a particular role, which is to moderate those moments when the passions of politics kind of get out of hand and they want to push in a direction, these sudden impulses. That is to say, it's there to check the House and the political passions of the House. I think what we're seeing is the momentum of that election, which was for that progressive agenda that wants to change America. All the things we've talked about, observed before, that is now pent up and it's still in control more narrowly in the House. But they're trying to proceed on the notion that they have a mandate and they want to push it into the Senate. And I think that's what that quote reflects. And I think the question here is whether the Senate should be understood to play a role in checking that immediate passion. All of our conversation about how there was not a mandate in this election. It's a divided country. There are many signs that Trumpism is alive and well. They picked up a lot of seats in the House. All of those are signs that actually what should happen here is this should not be a discussion about Trump or Biden in Georgia. This is a discussion about what's the legislative pressure for their agenda, which will be put on a President Biden. And in that context, looking at it from a broad constitutional point of view, the Senate needs to play that role. And so any kind of moderate old Democrat or Republican who may or may not like Trump personally, they should look at the dynamic of that conversation should be a different conversation now. And I think that Schumer quote really shows you where that legislative majority in the House, that passion wants to go, and he's part of that Democratic base, I think.
So what are the different paths, Matt Spalding? What happens if Mitch McConnell is the leader of the Senate because the Republicans win both of these races in Georgia. Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue are reelected. What is the path ahead if Chuck Schumer becomes the majority leader of the Senate because the AOC light John Ossoff and the radical Reverend Warnock win those elections?
Well, I think if they win those elections, they've got a majority. They got 50 in the House. The vice president will give them the 51 they need. All the agenda items talked about throughout this election, not only large legislative actions such as the Green New Deal, but the things I worry about more is when you start making some structural changes to the system. They would get rid of the filibuster. I have no doubt, even though that Senator Manchin said he doesn't like that idea, they'll pull him into that. They'll get rid of the filibuster. Once you get rid of the filibuster, now it's open to adding D.C. and Puerto Rico so you get more senators and packing the court. And they'll figure out some way to do that without it being so obvious, I think. But also other things, changing the electoral college or adjusting how it works through allowing states to have compacts. So all those things are back on the table. I think the best outcome for here is keep a Republican majority in the Senate. You're going to have a narrow Democratic majority in the House. You've got divided government. This is actually going to be better for a potential Biden presidency. He is just seen in this election. This was a close election. This was not a mandate for the progressive base of his party. He's already talking about moderating his cabinet appointees. He's already thinking about what that might mean. And lo and behold, I think you actually might see more things happen on some reasonable things if a President Biden and a Senator Mitch McConnell are working together. That's going to put immense pressure on the House. And all of a sudden, you've got the workings of constitutional government again, and they're working together.
Now, Dean Spalding, I don't believe. Well, let me preface that. A lot in the media are calling this a, quote, base election in Georgia, meaning that all the Republicans are going to turn out and all the Democrats are going to turn out and they're going to vote for the Republicans and the Democrats respectively. I reject that. I believe this is really about a left-right election and that center-left Democrats will vote for the Republicans because they do not want, and I'm just going to run through it, a packed Supreme Court. There are lots of Democrats that do not want to reduce military spending. There are lots of Democrats that do not want the new Green Deal. There are lots of Democrats that do not want to see skyrocketing taxes. There are lots of Democrats that don't want to end Medicare as we know it and make it single payer. There are lots of union Democrats. I mean, this is not a base election. Or defunding the police. So do you share my opinion that to call it a base election is to deny volition to the Georgia voters to be smart enough to know what's on the table here?
No, I completely agree. I think that's why the dynamic of this whole conversation has changed. I think it's another reason why the polling is completely meaningless. If the presidential question is resolved, and I think by then it will be resolved. It'll be resolved as we go through this. That removes that piece of it, and now you're literally talking about whether you want to give unified government to one party to do all of those things. And I think that will be a unified government will be driven by the legislature rather than the presidency. Senator Biden would be a relatively weak president. And so I think that's precisely what the question is. I don't think it is about Trump versus Biden. I think it's about who controls the government and what kind of agenda and where are we going. And that kind of question, I think, is a very different question. I think the mix of voting will be very different. And I think a lot of people, a lot of moderate Democrats they wanted to change the presidency. They would like to have different things on the agenda, but they don't want to change America. They don't want to transform the country.
Let's go back there. After World War II, England elected a socialist government. They chose to try socialism. That is not foreclosed in America. I just don't believe 2/3 of the American people want to do that. I think if this is actually explained in detail, Georgia will repudiate Ossoff and Warnock. I really do believe that if it's explained in detail. We should send roses to Chuck Schumer. I want to play it again. Cut number 1.
Now we take Georgia, and then we change the world. Yeah! I'm sorry, can you repeat that, Mr. Schumer? Now we take Georgia, and then we change America.
What do you think he means, Dean Spalding?
Well, I was in that tape many times, and one of the things I find amazing about it is he was actually willing to repeat it.
Yes,
double down. So it wasn't a hot mic that caught it. He said it. The reporter asked him to repeat it, and he repeated it loud and clear. By transform, they mean this whole array of things. The deep progressive agenda here is to structurally change the country. It's not merely it will raise taxes because there's a lot of things they want to do, but they want to really change how the country operates in a radical way by getting the court out of the way, adding more senators, so you undermine the role of the Senate. They would like to change the nature of the Senate if they could. This is precisely the kind of passionate-driven, interest-driven faction that the American constitutional system was meant to check. What are the checks on that? Well, the immediate check before us, the intended check, the check that led to the creation of a House and a Senate and the division of the legislature in the first place, is precisely what is at issue here. The role of the Senate is precisely to check that passionate interest, that faction, prevent it from running the government, and balancing it. And so they would have to work together in the legislative deliberative process. That's
now,
exactly
Senator Manchin, in what I consider to be a naked attempt to confuse people, said, don't worry about the Supreme Court. Don't worry about that. I'm not going to go for that. And we got a minute here, Dean Spalding. I like Senator Manchin. I don't believe him for a second. Not 1 second. I think he would not vote the Supreme Court, but the nominees that the judges that he would support are way to the left of the nominees that Mitch McConnell would allow through. And that's just the first step.
I like Senator Manchin. West Virginia is a great state and is pushing him and pulling him in that direction. If that's where Senator Manchin is, he should go independent and caucus with the other party to make that clear. That's how politics works. He shouldn't just make those kind of promises. I'd suggest he think about where he is on this question.
Well said. I'll be right back. The final segment of this week's Hillsdale Dialogue. Straight ahead, all things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. Before that last segment, though, let me double check on the markets brought to you by Birch Gold. You can find all the gold you need to buy at hughgold.com, hughgold.com, or text my name, Hugh, H-U-G-H, to 474747. Gold this morning at $1,879 an ounce. And, I think below 1900 is amazing. I bought gold well above 1900, and I don't regret it because I never sell gold. I just put it in the safety deposit box. But some of you need to balance out your retirement portfolio. And if you go to hughgold.com or text my name, Hugh, to 474747, Birch Gold will send you all the information on buying gold or on rolling over 10 to 25% of your portfolio into a physical precious metals-backed IRA. They maintain it. They take care of it. But it's yours. You actually own the gold. It's not an ETF. It's not a gold mine or anything like that. It's the physical precious metals stored for you by Birch Gold. Check it out at hughgold.com. And don't forget, the weekend is upon us. ReliefFactor.com. I told you about it in the first hour. I told you about it in the second hour. And, of course, I always tell you about it during the Hillsdale Dialogue as well. Carrie and Kirkman, Resveratrol, Omega. The weather's turning all over the country, and people are going back to doing push-ups and barbells inside. We're putting on extra sweaters and coats and trundling around outside, wearing their leggings, whatever it is. But whatever you're doing, chances are it's you're going to be sweating more and going less far, but maybe working out with different weights and that sort of thing. If you're using new muscle groups, they're going to be sore. And that's what ReliefFactor.com helps with. Support for the temporary relief of the minor aches and pains of your life that come with exercise, which you should be doing, and aging, which you cannot avoid. So as the years creep up on you and as your exercise regimes change, as the seasons change, don't forget ReliefFactor.com. $19.95. Join the tens of thousands of people who take it every single day. ReliefFactor.com. Make your weekend resolution about finally listening to Hugh and getting started on that. As I said, don't go anywhere. Coming back with Dean Matt Spalding as the Hillsdale Dialogue continues on this Friday, the 13th of November, 2020, here on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
If you actually want to be a healer, if you actually mean that, you know what you would do, Joe Biden? You would say, I want to convince the Trump people, I want to convince the deplorables that the votes are accurate. So let's do a full audit. I mean, why wouldn't he? Why wouldn't he say that? Hey, there are questions here. We have 4 states that are in play. The maximum lead he has is 0.67%, okay? Fewer than 100,000 votes among those 4 states of Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Arizona. I'm saying 100,000 all in, added together. If he wants to be a healer, one quick way to heal would say, you know what, we need to make sure these votes are legitimate for everyone's sake. And yet, of course, he's doing exactly the opposite. He's been crowned as the president-elect by people like Fox News and CNN. And I think they're of the belief, it's almost like, Dennis, it's football season now. There's a trick in football that I'm sure any fan has seen where when you get away with a controversial, the ref calls it your way, but review would probably overturn it. What does the team do in the NFL? They get right up to the line and snap it immediately because then you can't review the play. That's sort of what the media is trying to do here for Joe Biden. Well, let's just call him president-elect, and if we say it 5,000 times over the weekend, it's going to reinforce in people's minds that this is all decided when it is not decided.
Well said. So the problem, as I see it, is December 7th, I think it is the deadline, correct?
Yeah, I think the 8th are right in there. And the 14th, they have to actually vote, correct?
Yes. So
the electors.
What can the Trump people do within this short time span?
Well, no, listen, it's formidable, and I don't want to look. I'm optimistic, and I think we have to fight, okay? But I'm also realistic, and I will be the first to admit that given the condensed time frame that you're talking about, it is an uphill battle for us.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
Remember, Biden supported the 1995 crime bill, and Harris was a prosecutor. And she wrote, the best way to ensure that you remedy past missteps and work towards a more just future for black people is to take your direction from black grassroots organizers that have been engaged in this work for decades with a legacy that spans back to the first arrival of enslaved Africans. We would like to be actively engaged in your transition team's planning and policy work. Well, I'll bet they will be. I'll bet you Biden and Harris will say absolutely. Defund the police, as Clyburn from South Carolina will remind you, was a disaster for Democrats in this election, and you shouldn't forget that. When I read about Minneapolis officials, this is from the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, the left-wing publication in Minneapolis. Here's the headline. Minneapolis officials are considering
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt with Dean Matt Spalding. 2 Fridays after the election that shook the country, and about which controversy continues. And if you wish to register your opinion that we need to reform state voting systems, there's a petition at HughHewitt.com. Dean Spalding, I'd like to talk to you about the huge turnout, the enormous turnout. You've got Donald Trump, I think, cresting towards 72 million votes. I'm not sure, and I think Joe Biden will have 78 million votes at the end. It might be 150 million Americans voting. And so you have a president-elect with a large plurality, a large majority, but not without Donald Trump getting the most votes any Republican has ever gotten. What does that turnout tell you?
It tells us that the American people are intensely focused on this election, but it also tells us that this is a country, those are big numbers, but also they're pretty close numbers in the grander scheme of things. The president got more votes than he got last time. He got more votes than previous Republican nominees. This is not a overwhelming one-sided mandate, and I think it's very important for us to remember. It's wonderful. It's great that those numbers are that high. People are engaged. More people have registered to vote in both political parties. This is a very good sign. But remember, those kinds of things happen. Massive turnouts happen. New registrations happen when the country is divided and divided on fundamentally important questions. Those questions are still before us. They haven't gone away. One side does not defeat the other side. Indeed, the questions. What kind of country? Where are we going? What kind of constitutional system? Does the rule of law matter? All of these questions, they're still on the table. They're before us. I think they're before us in Georgia, but they will be on the table in 2 years and 4 years after that. This is by no means a closed question. One could argue that Donald Trump, having kind of pulled back the curtain and kind of turned over a lot of the kind of status quo of our politics, now leaves an open field for these political debates to be had and to have clear conversations, and we have the attention of the American people. That could be a very good sign for our politics, in my opinion, and I welcome it.
I do too. I want to close by talking a little bit about 100 years hence, what they will say about what we are living through now, because we can look back at 100 years and see the Great Dispute of 1876 clearly. We can see the era of Lochner clearly. We can see lots of things clearly. I don't think we can see clearly yet how this era is going to be written about 100 years hence. Do you, Dean Spalding?
No, of course not. That's partially because the immediate moment, which is this election and its outcome, is so unclear. But even with that, I think the key thing is what happens as we move forward, as we go into Georgia, as we look to midterms, and as you go into the next set of presidential elections. Which way is the Democratic Party going to go? Are they going to be able to have a stabilized relationship between Biden, who now represents the moderate wing of his party, and the base in the House, which is they've picked up, 3 or 4 more people in the squad? What happens to the Republican Party? Who are the candidates? Where is that party going? Does the president run again? I think all those are open questions, which we've got to remain engaged in if we're going to shape how that's going to be looked on years from now. This is by no means over. In many ways, this is merely the opening, I think, of a great conversation, a political constitutional conversation about where our country is going.
You know, Matt, I've heard the president-elect described not as a moderate, but as a centrist within the Democratic Party, meaning he has moved, as the Democratic Party moved left, to the left. He's not a moderate, but he tries to keep his party together. Do you think that's accurate?
That's probably a better way of putting it. I don't know that he has a deep ideological mindset of his own, but I will say that one way to keep him as a centrist is precisely to have a Republican Senate to cause that check. If you lose the Senate and the Congress is 100% Democratic, they are driven by an ideological position and opinion, and they will push him. He went with them in the primaries. In the election, he was a little bit more nervous, but he will go there if he needs to go there. He needs political pressure, which is why those Senate seats are so important to set up the debate where we go after this in terms of midterms and future elections.
And those Senate seats are best served by SenateLeadershipFund.org. But if you want to serve yourself, go and get a big serving of everything that is available at Hillsdale.edu. Hillsdale.edu. Dean Spalding, we got less than a minute. Is the college going to convene a symposium on everything that's happened?
I'm sure we will. We talk about these things. We're talking about them now. We will convene. Courses will convene. We will continue, and I think this will be a keen conversation about the future of the parties, and we'll have something to say about that, not in a partisan sense, but I think in what this means for the future of our constitutional republic. And I think things look right now like we're going to have that conversation, and that's for the good of all of us, good for the country, and we want to be engaged in that conversation.
And good for the world. Good for the world. Hillsdale.edu. If you want a foretaste of that, all of the courses and the offerings that are available at Hillsdale.edu. Thank you, Dean Matt Spalding, running the Kirby Center and the graduate program for Hillsdale in D.C. Thank you, America, for listening. A big thank you to Adam and Harley, to Ben and Dwayne for a great week of work after 2 great weeks of work. In fact, after 20 years of great work. We'll be back on Monday for the next Hugh